Audra, you want to start?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Audra Carson, and I lead content marketing and media platforms at General Mills. And how I like to simply describe that is I lead kind of a publishing house inside of a house of brands. So we have 3 very large owned media properties, Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, and Tablespoon, along with their web, email, social media presence. And we leverage those properties not only to build audiences at scale, but then to sell General Mills products.
Good morning, good afternoon, I should say. I'm Josh Peterson. I'm with Sleep Number, and my Sleep Number setting is 40. That's something that we
35.
talk about as a brand. 35, excellent. I've talked to a number of other Sleep Number owners in the room, and hopefully there'll be a few more of you by the end of today. At any rate, I lead digital media there. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Media, and Sleep Number is a mattress retail business and brand, all sort of vertically integrated. And we have 560 stores across 50 states. And we just added a store last month in Manhattan, so we consider that our international expansion, if you will, because that island is very unique in its own right.
I'm Michael Bepko. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Hail Mary Snacks. We are an indulgent CPG brand based in Dallas. We essentially make mind-blowing indulgence out of super clean, fresh, plant-based ingredients, which is kind of polarizing on opposite ends of the scale. So we've actually got a very unique business in that we've been around for about 10 years, but we're still in startup mode. The last 2 years, 2 years ago, we went through a massive rebrand and really started to restructure the company from the ground up, starting with all the elements of the brand. And we've got a lot of challenges in that we're refrigerated. We are about 70% ACV in the natural channel, 25% in the specialty channel, and only about 7% of the conventional channel. So that white space in conventional is really driving what we're doing in mobile and digital right now.
That's great. Audra, you just mentioned you've been in this, going at this for 7 years. Can you talk a little bit about how measurements changed and the KPIs that you're managing against and thinking about each day?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually been measuring the impact of owned media on our business for over a decade, and we've evolved how we do that quite significantly in the last, I would say, 18 to 24 months, and we see it evolving even more so in the future. And so when we first started measuring the impact of our owned websites and email programs, it was very much like traditional media measurement, right? We would look at sales lifts for anonymous website visitors versus owned email subscribers. We would look at specific brand lift studies for, did our impressions have an impact on a sales lift for Yoplait versus Pillsbury, or on different consumer segments, whether it be millennials or Hispanics, what have you. And about 2 years ago, kind of following a restructure of General Mills, I was tasked to lead this business, and they had said, your team is cut in half and your budget's cut in half. And I was like, well, thank you for the opportunity. And so one of the opportunities that I saw was that all of that measurement that we had done in the past was fine and good, but it wasn't understood because it wasn't being measured under the same stick as how our brands were measuring the rest of their media investment. And so we were kind of measuring in isolation, or we were measuring for a moment in time or for a specific campaign. And we weren't measuring on how it was complementing or how it was connecting into the other investments like trade spend, price promotion spend, paid TV, and digital media. And so we made a pretty big effort to say, hey, we're going to measure all of our owned and earned media in a marketing mix model, similar to what we do for those other investments. Let's show up on the same sheet. And we did that, and it was really interesting to see what followed. We found that paid search was driving a significant volume, as an example, organic search, content distribution on Facebook and Pinterest, our email subscribers. All of this was contributing to Pillsbury's sales, to Betty Crocker's sales. And we are now in a place where we are contributing anywhere from 1% all the way up to 12% of any given General Mills business in terms of their in-store sales. In some cases, we're as large as some of their biggest customers, and it's been really fun to see through that measurement how now they're trying to write us checks and give us more money and ask us to deliver more impressions for them. Now, I hope that that measurement model evolves into the future, and a lot of what we've been talking about here today is that awareness and purchase is combining in the funnel for consumers. And I have a dream, kind of like Brian's just shared his dream with all of you, that someday I'll be able to go to a brand manager or a salesperson and say, hey, guess what? I just drove this much of your brand sales yesterday or last week or last month, because we're making those connections directly to online shopping carts at retail.
Yeah, that's awesome. Josh, you want to share kind of your journey in measurement?
Yeah, ours is a bit different being a vertically integrated brand. As we think about Sleep Number, we manufacture our own beds and distribute them through our own stores and our own website and our own phone channel. And kind of the beauty of that vertical integration is that it's all within our own purview. And what was really interesting to kind of think about as we were looking at that was, okay, well, that's great, but I started there in e-commerce. And so I was trying to drive e-commerce and trying to hit those metrics and trying to hit conversion. And I think Brian articulated it really well with his multi-trillion-dollar slide around, just how big e-commerce is overall. It's not the big piece of the pie. And so we started to question, okay, what is this in service of? How are we building a web experience to go try to drive that? And now that I lead media, we're trying to think about, and what does the media have to do to drive either a website visit or ultimately a store visit? And so as we've thought about that, we've really tried to get more deeply into the customer journey and follow it all the way through. And Ovative has really helped us do that, actually. We now measure digitally influenced sales, looking at the connection point that the consumer has all the way up funnel, all the way through to the website if they go to the website, and then ultimately when they end up in store. And you can imagine with a pretty high average AOV in our stores with a relatively low number of transactions, we were like, this should be easy to get at. We've got a highly lucrative opportunity to try to drive more transactions in store if we can just figure out how to do that. And so together with Ovative's help, we are now measuring digitally influenced sales. We even use a measurement called Unified Commerce Conversion, which is just a fancy way of trying to say that we're measuring those connection points. All of that digital traffic we have, all of the conversions we have in store, online or on the phone, what is that total conversion rate, and how do we look at that? And it's very similar to what you saw earlier from Brian.
That's great. Michael, you're kind of in a different place, smaller brand. You just redefined who you were. How do you think about your digital media spend and how you measure it, and how do you prioritize?
So we are in the early stages of just testing and learning what type of investment is enough to move the needle. So when I say early stages, very early stages. So we've got a huge brand awareness challenge, an extremely small marketing budget, and those two things don't really go well together. So what we did earlier in the year was we just dove into a digital awareness campaign. We moved into a really large retailer in a new marketplace for us, and knew that we had access now to 1,200 stores, very small presence on the shelf in a dairy set. And so the challenge was, how do we make sure that the consumers are aware of Hail Mary before they go shopping, and B, how do we actually get them to this particular spot in the store? And so a variety of tactics with what we did in digital. The biggest investment came with mobile location targeting, because that was enough to really serve up ads and then measure in-store visits post-ad impression. Well, at the end of the day, even though we saw tremendous sort of mid-funnel conversions like email signups and coupon downloads, and type in your zip code to find exactly where you can find Hail Mary at a retailer nearest you, it still wasn't really a strong enough conversion for our board, who really wanted to show exactly how we were driving velocity at the shelf. So now, moving on to part two, we're partnering with Ibotta, just launched a campaign where I have super high hopes, because we are able to show, A, it's a performance model, so we're only paying for people that actually get the rebate. So it's kind of phase two, where the first was really how are we going to drive awareness, and now we're applying something where we can really show conversion. And then end of the year, moving into next year is kind of a different story, but it looks good so far.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Josh and Audra, you both talked about new metrics coming into play. In my experience, lots of senior level people in companies get used to their way of how they've looked at the business for many years and looking at those metrics. And they're uncomfortable with newer metrics. Share a little bit about that journey of how you built trust and refocus on the right metrics.
Sure, I can go first.
Sure.
So as we started talking about our fancy unified commerce conversion metric, you can imagine that the executive team was looking at that and going, well, it's a lot lower than the store conversion rates. And the way we were thinking about store conversion was based on the number of leads we had as a ratio to the number of sales we achieved. So it wasn't a pure, kind of one-to-one conversion. It was a ratio, basically. And in order to be a lead at Sleep Number, it meant that you were giving us your full name, address, firstborn, et cetera. We were collecting a lot of information from you. You were a highly engaged visitor in the store. Maybe not every visitor in the store was measured that way, but that's how we drove our leads. And so that store conversion rate is a little bit of a misnomer. It's an inflated number because these are highly intentional purchasers that are giving us that lead information. So when we came back to them and said, hey, we're looking at digitally influenced sales and conversion more holistically across our full digital traffic portfolio, all of a sudden their eyes popped out of their heads because the conversion rate dropped pretty significantly, but the numerator, the amount of traffic, was much more significant. And so we're like, we're going after a bigger piece of the market here. We're going after a bigger piece of the pie. We may not convert as well, but the opportunity is to measure that, understand that, and then try to improve it from there once they got used to this new metric.
Yeah, there's a couple of new metrics that we've introduced in the past months to year here. One of them is around, once we started measuring our owned investments on the same sheet as the rest of the marketing investments, we really started to see the complementary nature of each of the individual channels and how they work together. And so not only does digital have an influence on in-store sales, but paid search has an influence on website traffic, and television has an impact on email signups, as an example. And so it was really interesting and really eye-opening to show how it all kind of works together, which is really important because we want to engage with consumers wherever they want to engage with us. And if we can kind of stack and ladder those things together, we're going to be stronger in the end. The second thing that we're moving towards, and I mentioned this a little bit, is add to cart. So how many people are actually adding the ingredients from a recipe, which roughly 50 to 60% of our traffic comes to our platforms from organic search, which is a really high intent signal. And then if now all of a sudden they're adding those particular ingredients for that recipe to a cart, we're going to feel pretty confident in that number. Now there isn't closed loop reporting yet on that, but we're starting to track it as kind of a proxy metric. And then I would say thirdly, a new metric for us is really around, we spend a lot of money. We work with the Ovative group from a performance media standpoint to acquire new email subscribers or to efficiently drive traffic to our platforms. And historically, we focused on kind of cost per acquisition, and then we focused on an activation rate of the people that we're acquiring. Are they starting to engage with us? And we're actually moving to a cost per quality acquisition metric. So let's just not pay for email signups and email addresses. Let's pay for people that we know are going to engage, that we know are going to buy General Mills products, and our willingness to pay is actually going up. And that's a change, right? It was how do we get the butts and seats or the eyeballs to site or the emails as cheaply as possible, and we're actually moving to a model where we're investing more.
Can I just tag on to that for a second?
Sure.
Similar to the quality acquisition metric you guys are talking about at Sleep Number, we're looking at qualified unique visitors. We're actually trying to not just measure the amount of traffic we get, but we're looking for that quality, and we're looking for some key actions to occur on the site. One of them happens to be add to cart, of course, because that's a clear buying intent signal. And so we're looking for those consumers to take those actions, and if they do, we view them as a much more qualified consumer at the end of the day.
How did you learn what those were? Did they tie to purchase in store, or did you think through other metrics you were looking at?
Yeah, great question. With the ability to measure kind of end to end on the consumer journey and being able to tie all the way through to store sales at the end of the day, we looked at the actions on the site that were most predictive of a future store sale. And so that's how we zeroed in on which actions mattered. And to be honest with you, we got it wrong at first. We had to tweak it and change it and improve it. And we're continuing to work on it. We're also looking at things like Google store visits. Google is measuring that and looking at that and providing some of that data back to us. That's obviously a visit to the store. It may not end up as a lead like I talked about earlier, but that's still a visit with a high purchase intent. And so we're remodeling our key actions and our qualified metrics based on what ends up happening in store.
I mean, each of you could play in incredibly competitive environments. How you approach your media and your measurement kind of enable you to compete in a better way, better fashion?
I don't want to start with that one.
Okay. Josh or Audra?
Go
I
ahead.
can start, sure.
Sure.
So the mattress category is interesting. It was a sleepy category, no pun intended, for a while, and one of the late adopters of kind of the digital transition that we've all been a part of. And what was interesting about that was obviously, the desire for most consumers to want to end up laying on a bed in store before purchasing is a big part of, what's happening in the mattress buying cycle. And so I think, these digital startups, these digitally native brands that emerged, Casper, Tuft & Needle, I'm sure you guys know some of them as well, kind of came out of nowhere. And they were able to relatively easily, with kind of low barriers to entry, build a product and deliver that through an e-commerce model, from a real convenience perspective, focusing really on the buying cycle and improving that, maybe versus really differentiating on the product. And it caught us off guard at first, and we said, okay, whoa, something's happening here. And we realized, okay, we need to fight back against that and make sure that our differentiated product really cuts through. Sleep Number offers a smart bed that fully tracks and understands how you sleep each night. And it's not well known yet. We're trying to lead a smart bed revolution, and we're early in that journey. But to get that across against these commoditized players that have emerged really aggressively has required a lot of fortitude on investment, a lot of fortitude with our media plans, and a lot of fortitude with the retail field to say the traffic is going to come, they're going to be highly educated and very aware of what a Sleep Number bed is. Your job is to sell that and close that deal when the customer arrives. But we have gone through a big, big transition in the category for sure, just like every other category across retail really has.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly different angle to answer your question. And I would say that we've been working hard to show that the investments in owned media are actually, they actually pay back to the business in terms of first-party data, right? That can then be leveraged by our kind of upper funnel paid media teams, and that we can actually start to sequentially message. So we have another media agency that works on our brand media, where we're starting to kind of, they'll do their work in the upper funnel based on our first-party data, and then when it gets to a certain point or a certain amount of frequency, they'll hand it off to our team, and we'll start to try to develop a relationship with that person or get them to, buy the products through our properties at our retailers. And so I would say that we're making investments in the long term and investments in different parts of the kind of value equation for media.
Yeah, that's great. Mobile, how has mobile changed how you're thinking about your media and how your customers are interacting with you, and what that means to drive people to a store?
Yeah, it's just like in the last presentation. It was that's exactly the challenge that we have. I mean, we can focus on converting on our website. We actually just relaunched direct to consumer through our online store about 2 months ago. So we're still even learning about those consumers that choose to purchase online. Obviously, making a connection and showing how we can convert to purchase at the shelf is a totally different ballgame. But again, looking at a platform like Ibotta and the presentation that Brian just gave, it's super exciting to a brand like us, because that's exactly what's missing from our portfolios. We need to be able to show, what we learned from our digital campaign that was mostly focused on mobile was that, yes, we had a significant investment on display and social advertising, but we saw some lift in sales, but we really weren't able to show attribution to that particular spend. Whereas something like these responsive ad units, where you can show that it's been clipped and it's in the queue on Ibotta, and then actually show all the way to purchase. We're still in a place where we've got a lot to learn, but we're really excited to see platforms like Ibotta be presented to us, where we see a lot of opportunity to get really smart with our marketing dollars, but then also how can we maybe possibly even decrease trade spend with these retailers, because we're just spending more efficiently with a platform like Ibotta.
From a media perspective, I think, number one, just like every brand in the room, our digital traffic now is 70% mobile. And, the latest stats I saw from the retail industry are in the high 60s. So I think we're pretty much right in line with that. And to be honest with you, as we looked at that when it was less than 50, we thought mobile was primarily an upper funnel tactic. We thought it was, mainly a lean back moment with your phone where you were doing some research, but then the rest of the customer journey took over. And as that customer got more serious, we assumed they were going to their desktop or laptop, because we saw conversion happening there, we saw more actions happening there, but we didn't know what was happening at the end of the day in store. Now that we can fully measure that all the way through, what we've seen with mobile and the growth of mobile and the change, of course, in consumer behavior is that everything is happening there. And it's happening in now bite-sized chunks, as I think we all kind of recognize. It's in that moment where I might be in a lean back moment, just looking at a product, learning about its features and benefits, and then later coming back and comparing, reading ratings and reviews, et cetera. So the mobile phone has a lot to do with the entire customer journey and plays a really big role.
Yeah, for us, about 85% of our traffic comes mobilely, and we know that for grocery, about 51% of in-store sales are influenced by a mobile device, and that's up 18% year over year, and I bet a year from now it'll be up even more than that. And so for us, it's really about removing friction now that grocery is finally making its way online. We all know, we've talked a lot today about awareness and purchase starting to combine in the funnel. Consumers see something online on their mobile device, and they want to be able to get that, and so their expectations for grocery are really no different. And so we are trying to, leverage that mobile presence to remove that friction for consumers over time. And I think that the influence will just continue to grow, the influence of mobile on both offline and online sales for grocery.
As you reflect on the future, what's next? Where are you focusing your energies in either media or measurement to drive store?
For mobile, our big investments are in a couple of areas. One is our Sleep IQ app, which I haven't spoken about yet, but it's all of our consumers, once they become owners, end up with a Sleep IQ app that can tell them a nightly score. We have hundreds of sensors inside the bed that pick up all of your biometrics. And what's great about that is that creates then the opportunity to engage with our brand on a daily basis. And that's something that, when the mattress cycle is 5 to 10 years, that was really hard to establish that kind of engagement. So we're investing pretty heavily there to make that experience great. We're investing also in our media, but like the conversations today, sometimes that's, it's hard to see those dollars go into that bucket because there's a lot of churn in that space for sure. And we're all trying to find smarter ways around how to make that media investment better. And then the last piece is just making our mobile experience on the website even better. We're still a little bit behind in terms of site speed. Our user experience has grown dramatically, but we still don't have the cart and checkout capabilities we want to have, so we're investing there as well.
Yeah, I would say General Mills at large is investing in direct response media, as we were just talking about. So whether that's incentives-based or whether that's on the shopper marketing side, partnering with our retailers. So that's a big area for us. And the objective of that is obviously to drive that first basket advantage for e-commerce, or to drive that, in-store sale. And we think that, if we can make it into those first online baskets again, as online grocery sales start to scale, that will pay dividends in the end. And our willingness to pay for that up front is a little bit greater than what we're paying for kind of our other media efforts.
And I think for us, we're really looking to both third-party platforms to help us get the brand and actually allow for purchase to happen. But then also looking at our retail partners that have fully built mobile apps and have their an existing audience built in that we can leverage. A lot of it happening with coupons and discounts and stuff like that. But again, very early in the testing stage to really understand what works best for us, and just measuring every little step so that when we figure out the right formula, then we can throttle it and really put a lot of investment behind what we know is proven to work.
Open to the question.
Open it up?
Sure.
All right, let's open it up to the audience. Who's got the first question for the panel?